Welcome to the Will of the Gods channel, an indie deck building game. I'm Sure, creator of the game. Today we will be talking about economics in Will of the Gods and design decisions behind it. But to get a better overview of those, you need to understand what are basic cards, god cards, favors and a shop. So let me start from the beginning. In Will of the Gods, you build deck during each combat, not in between fights, like in other popular PC card games. So now, let me explain all of those on a real game example. You can see that first I will play 2 favor cards. By doing so, you can see that I'm getting some coins. Those are favors of the Nordic gods, which I can later trade for cards which are aspects, items or creatures connected with those deities. Okay, to the basic cards, there are 3 basic types which are some kind of archetype. God's Favor, which you already know what is their purpose. Strikes, they serve mainly as a card that deal instant damage with some additional effect. And last one are Spirits. Those are creatures that extend player and opponent pressure on a board. Those 3 highlighted cards that you can see here are not connected to any of the gods. In Will of the Gods, there is a mechanism that would be hard to reproduce in standard board game, and it is called morphing. Whenever you acquire a base card, it's just simply added to your deck. But what happens if I want to get a card connected to a god, like a Trickery of Loki? As I do, hover my mouse over Trickery of Loki card, you can see that there is an arrow pointing at one of my cards. It means that when I will buy this card, my God's Favor will morph into Trickery of Loki. So conclusion is pretty easy. To buy God's cards, you must first have basic cards inside of your deck. And the question here is, can I morph any of base card into any of God's card? The answer is no. God's cards also have their archetype, which was mentioned before. Showing this on a card is not developed yet, but they are sorted in a shop by columns so player can identify it quickly. You can see in this video all of the spirits are in a single column. And it means that all of the god cards in this column do require a spirit inside of the player collection. Another question in here is how do the player knows if he has any spirits, strikes or favors inside of his deck. And there are 2 ways to tell those. First, you can see that below the spirit or any other basic card there is a number which tells the player how many of base cards of that type he has in his collection. They can be anywhere, in hand, deck or graveyard, it really doesn't matter. Second one is that cards in shop are grayed out when there is no favor or base cards to morph inside of the collection. You can see that as I'm morphing the last spirit, cards went grey, but I still have some favor left and I can acquire basic card or morph those of different type. Last thing about economics in Will of the Gods Nordic, as the player acquires a god card, it costs to increase. This mechanism is here because some cards are just better in particular situations than the other. This is not a problem, it is just how do you play the game. Without those design decisions, player could create a deck which consists only of a single card. This would be really boring, and player decision would have low or even no impact on the game. I did wanted player to feel that they have control over what they are doing, and their choices do really matter. And this would be thing that will distinguish the good player from a bad one. With card cost increase, game forces the player to diversify his deck, but he can still choose which cards are better for a particular encounter and acquire more of them for the increased cost. Example situation? Do I still increase my economic power and acquire Trickery of Loki for 6 favor? Or do I buy 2 creatures and a strike? I guess now you know everything about Will of the Gods in game economics. From the other side, this is my first scripted video. During Christmas break, I did had enough time and previous movies gave me an overview of how can I script the video from the start till the end. How do you feel about it? This is all for you now. See ya and bye!